Hello and welcome. You're watching the Tov Jewish News channel. With us today is Mark, chairman of Republicans Overseas in Israel. Hello, Mark. Mark, so we've seen America providing support to Israel since the beginning of the war in Gaza. The Biden admin has sent American aircraft carriers to the Mediterranean Sea. But are we really seeing America doing everything in its power to help Israel? Or does the democratic leftist agenda still affect their actions in regards to Israel, and they're not doing everything in their power?
Well, it's a very good question, and it's a complicated one, something that folks here in Israel don't fully understand. Americans said from the very beginning, after October 7th, that they would do everything that in their power to allow Israel to defend itself. However, what they didn't say is that they would support Israel in the destruction of Hamas and the terror structure in Gaza. Later on, they made that statement, but they've always tempered their comments about their support with concerns about the humanitarian needs of the population in Gaza. They were opposed initially to our ground campaign in Gaza, and after we began the ground campaign, they pushed hard for ceasefires in connection with the release of the hostages and so on. They've always been trying to put the brakes on Israel's response to the horrors of October 7th. And the carriers, by the way, Michael, really don't have anything to do with Gaza. They have to do with showing American power to the Iranians, and that's another part of this conflict. They're very concerned that the conflict will spread. They have Americans at the same time. I need to say this: they've been very supportive of Israel in terms of supplying the munitions necessary for Israel to carry out the ground campaign in Gaza and along the border with Lebanon against the Hezbollah. And they've been very supportive of keeping the waterways, international waterways in the Red Sea, open to international traffic, including shipping to Israel. So, from that point of view, they have been very, very supportive. And recently, diplomatically, in the Security Council, when the United Nations Security Council wanted to call for a ceasefire immediately, and the Americans vetoed the resolution, and that was important. So the American support has been important, it has been effective, but it is not 100%. And the Americans have different interests than Israel does, and you'll see this coming more and more to the surface in the weeks and months to come.
So I want to develop on the point you just touched on. How would the war looked with a Republican president in America? For example, if Donald Trump or any other Republican candidate would be in power in America, what would the American support to Israel look like?
Well, for one thing, Donald Trump, the former president, and the other leading Republican candidates, Ambassador Nikki Haley and Governor Ron DeSantis, have all expressed exactly what the Biden administration didn't talk about when they responded to the events of October 7th. The Republican candidates are all unified in their view that Israel must destroy Hamas, the Islamic Jihad, and the Palestinian terror infrastructure in Gaza. Moreover, unlike the Biden administration, Republicans are not calling for the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah to come and take over the administration of Gaza after the war is finished. That's another important distinction. So, and I would have to say that had the Republican president, had there been a Republican president at the present time, that is, if Trump had won the 2020 election, I don't think anything like what we're seeing today would have occurred in the first place. Not only in the Middle East, but also in the Ukraine and the problems with China and so on.
So we kind of also see the support for Israel in the Republican Party changing, because now we have candidates like Vivek Ramaswamy who say that America shouldn't support Israel in the same way as it did previously, that the nature of the American support to Israel must change. Do you see really a change in attitude towards Israel in the Republican Party, or is it just some specific examples?
No, I don't. I'm familiar with Vivek Ramaswamy's views. I think he's a little bit confused about foreign policy in general. He's a newcomer to politics. He's a fresh voice, We like to see his participation in the primary campaigns. But on Israel, I think he really does not understand the full complexities of it. And his views are a very, very small minority within the Republican Party today. So and I think, over time, I think he too will come to realize the importance of a balanced and effective American foreign policy in the Middle East. I think most Republicans, and Donald Trump was leading the way in this regard, are not interested in seeing wars. I mean, and the Trump administration was very effective in keeping the United States out of new wars, any place in the world. At the same time, keeping our enemies, the American enemies and Israel's enemies, at bay. So that is the Republican approach. And again, I wouldn't be concerned about Vivek Ramaswamy. Right now, he's not doing too well in the standings in the polls, but he is a fresh voice, and hopefully he'll learn.
So we've seen now a plethora of Republican voices in the Republican primary, from Chris Christie to Donald Trump and Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramaswamy. Who of those candidates do you think will be the best for Israel? You as a person who knows the Republican Party from inside.
I think the top three, President Donald Trump to begin with, and Nikki Haley and Dennis DeSantis will be excellent for Israel. Okay, in the case of President Trump, he's already proved it. For him, it's not about words. He's done it. You've seen what he did with the Abraham Accords. You see what he did with the embassy in Jerusalem. You see what he did in recognizing the Golan Heights sovereignty of Israel. You saw what he did in pulling America out of the terrible Iranian nuclear deal, and on and on and on. He was laying a foundation for a really new Middle East, and I'm hopeful that if he comes back into power after the November elections, that will return. But the other two candidates, at least, have completely totally embraced his foreign policy ideas when it comes to the Middle East. So I'm not concerned. The Republicans, unlike the Democrats, have Israel's back.
Do you see the future American election in 2024 affecting American support for Israel? And if yes, in what way will it affect it?
Well, as I've said, if the Republicans win in 2024, the American position regarding the Middle East will improve dramatically. But if the Democrats win, and it's not clear whether President Biden will actually be the Democratic nominee after the summer, but if the Democrats win, I'm afraid we'll have more of what we've been seeing so far, even more hesitation by the American administration to support Israel to the extent even the Biden administration has done so far. I think you'll see a change in the American policy regarding Jerusalem, regarding the Palestinian state. Already, Secretary of State Blinken has said that immediately after this war, a Palestinian state has to emerge under the leadership of the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah. I mean, this, for anybody in Israel, understands how absolutely absurd that idea is after what happened, the horrible events of October 7th. We're just not ready for a Palestinian state or a Palestinian administration in Gaza.
The recent request from the Biden admin, as we saw in the news, to ask Israel to allow to enter, fuel tanks into Gaza, which will eventually get to Hamas, which will use it, to ventilate their tunnels in Gaza. Are they related to the electoral season opening in America?
I think now that we're in the last 11 months before the presidential elections, and the primaries are going to begin already in January and February, I think you have to look at everything the Americans do now within the context of the elections. And the Democrats, again, unfortunately, have to rely heavily upon the support of the extreme left wing and the young voters. They have a problem right now. According to the polling, the young voters who are largely pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel are not supporting this administration, not supporting the Biden candidacy for president. And if the Democrats ever have any hope of winning the election in 24, they're going to have those young voters come out enthusiastically and to vote. If they don't vote, I think the Republicans have a very good chance of taking the White House and capturing the Congress altogether.
Mark, so if you look chronologically at the relations between the U.S. and Israel, both the Democratic and the Republican Party were always, in some way or another, very supportive of Israel. But now we've seen the appearance of new figures in the Democratic Party, like AOC, like Rashid Tlaib. I hope I'm saying the name correctly. But we've seen many new figures in the Democratic Party who are anti-Israel. Is the Democratic Party changing and becoming anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas?
First of all, you're absolutely right about the history. In the past, American support for Israel was strongly bipartisan. Okay, there were small differences about the Palestinian state, about the legitimacy or legality of settlements in Judea and Samaria and Gaza at the time. But the Democratic Party in the last several years has moved radically to the left, off the rails. And the people that you mentioned, like AOC and Tlaib and Bowman and Cory Bush from Missouri, they have a lot of influence. As I indicated in my earlier answer, they are the Bernie Sanders, the senator from Vermont, who's Jewish nominally, in any case, and spent time in an Israeli kibbutz, but they are not very pro-Israel in the way they look at it. Very pro-Palestinian, and you can see the the effects of this radical turn in the Democratic Party and the progressive left in what's happening on American college campuses and universities today. I mean, they're almost across the country, and from north to south, east to west. You see college students, uh, including Jewish students, amazingly, holding up signs calling for the freeing Palestine from the river to the sea, basically a euphemism for genocide of Israeli Jews. So this is it's really incredible to see this. There is this complete misunderstanding and lack of education and knowledge by the young people, but they carry a very, very heavy, important role in American politics today. And that is a sad turn of events for the country, for Israel, for the United States, for the world, frankly.
Mark, you touched on a very interesting topic. You touched on the topic of this, of the support for Islamists in American academia, and there was a recent poll from the beginning of the war that showed that most of the older generations, right, they supported overwhelmingly Israel. But Gen Z, it was like 50-50. 50% thought that Hamas were the good guys, and 50% thought that Israel were the good guys. So it really shows like a change in the American consciousness in relation to Israel. Do you think those kids who now think that Hamas, 50% of them think that Hamas are the good guys, will they change as they grow older? Or does it really show a shift in American-Israeli relations, and Israel will have to look for unions with other countries outside of America?
Well, first, I'd like to make this comment. I've in the last month been in the United States now twice, and I've been in the West and in the East. There's a great middle in America, and the overwhelming, my impression is, and according to the polls, this is the case. The overwhelming majority of Americans, okay, and from all ages, support Israel. 60, 70%. Those are good numbers. Then the small number of young folks you've mentioned, Gen Z, who have been more pro-Palestinian than any other time in American history, they're a problem. But I'm not a prophet, so I can't predict what they will be like in another 20 years when they become the adult. Well, they're adults now, but when they become more grown up. I think what I hope is, and this is a sincere hope, that they will study the issues and learn the issues and what happened October 7th and the very nature of Palestinian nationalism in a more careful way. Right now, because of this woke phenomenon that is conquering American youth and also around the world, there's this notion of intersectionality. In other words, everybody that's in power is the oppressor, and the people that are not in power are the oppressed, and the oppressed are always right, and they can do anything they need to do in order to overthrow the oppressors. And unfortunately, and Israel has been lumped together with racists and gender discrimination and so on, really unfairly. But because of this intersectionality idea, uh, Israel is an oppressor, a colonizer in the eyes of these people, and they've got the whole narrative wrong. It's based simply on a misunderstanding of history and the facts. So I hope the message will get to these people, and they will understand that in the Middle East, Palestinian nationalism is not a positive thing. It is a threat not only to Israel, not only to the Jewish people, but to Western civilization as a whole. And if we don't confront it, as we are now doing in Gaza and on the northern border, the consequences will be very, very serious, catastrophic for those young people that think differently today and their children when they have.
Mr. Mark Zell, chairman of the Republican Party in Israel, I hope you're correct. And those people will wake up from their horrible views on Israel and Hamas. Thank you all for watching us. Subscribe to us on all of our social media platforms. Thank you. Have a nice day.